We're going to call this meeting to order. It's our regular city council meeting, and it's just shortly after 6:30 p.m. As a reminder, if you would like to speak before the council tonight, please complete a blue speaker request form and give it to the clerk prior to the item. Roll call, please, Ms. Vasquez.
Councilmember Yao?
Here.
Councilmember Lorimore?
Present.
Councilmember Tesari? Mayor Pro Tem Plot?
Here.
Mayor Rigby?
Here.
Thank you.
And tonight's invocation will be presented by Pastor Rob Norris of the Crossings, please.
Please join me as I pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together, Lord. Bless this meeting. Lord, I pray for the men and women that serve our city tirelessly, Lord, day in and day out. Lord, we pray over this agenda. Give us wisdom and knowledge and discernment to make the right choices for our city. Lord, I pray for the first responders and the police officers and our schools, Lord, that you would have a protection over them and the people that protect our city. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to serve here. Lord, let us continue to strive to make Eastville a great city. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're now going to have the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. It'll be led by Councilmember Tesari.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3. This is additions and revisions. The council may only add an item to the agenda after making a finding that there is a need to take immediate action on the item and that the item came to the attention of the agency subsequent to the posting of the agenda. An action adding an item to the agenda requires a majority vote of the council. Ms. Vasquez, is there any requests from staff
No, sir.
or from the public?
No, sir.
Anything from the council?
And this is my first time doing this, so correct me if I'm doing this wrong, but can I move item 10 and 11 to have that before city council business?
Sounds like a great idea. All in favor?
Anything else from the council? Then I would solicit a motion for that.
So I move.
Councilmember Yao?
Yes.
Councilmember Lorimore?
Aye.
Councilmember Tesari? Mayor Pro Tem Plot?
Yes.
Mayor Rigby?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, we will be moving on to item number 4, presentations and announcements. And at this time, if the council will please join me up front for item 4.1, and I'd like to invite Mr. Alan Jolly, please. I think this is on. The city of Eastville is pleased to proclaim April 2019 as DMV Donate Life California Month. Organ tissue, marrow, and blood donations are life-giving acts recognized worldwide as expressions of compassion to those in need. More than 113,000 individuals nationwide and more than 21,000 in California are currently on the National Organ Transplant Waiting List. And an average, 20 people die each day while waiting due to the shortage of donated organs. A single individual's donation of the heart, lungs, liver, kidney, pancreas, and small intestine can save up to 8 lives. Millions of lives each year are saved and healed by donors of organs, tissue, bone marrow, and blood. California residents can sign up with the Donate Life California Donor Registry when applying for or renewing their driver's license or ID cards at the California Department of Motor Vehicles. And on behalf of the city and the city council, I present this proclamation to Alan Jolly, who is an ambassador for One Legacy Donate Life. And I'll turn it over to him. I'd like to just take a minute if he can just share kind of what he does for them and kind of a little bit of how he got involved.
Thank you. Most of you guys know my story, so I'm not going to talk to you guys. Sorry. So I'm an ambassador with One Legacy, and what I do is I go out and share my story. I am not only a resident of the city of Eastville. I've been a resident for 12 years now, but I'm also a donor dad. In 2010, I got the worst phone call of my life. I got a phone call from my wife saying that my daughter was being rushed to the hospital. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was really going on. I made it from the city of El Monte to Corona Regional Medical Center in about 30 minutes. Now, I hope there's no CHP officers. I don't know how I did it, but for some reason I did. My daughter was life flighted from Corona Regional Medical Center to Loma Linda, where she passed away 4 days later. We made the difficult decision to donate her organs. So her heart went to a little girl named Sophia in the state of Washington in Seattle. This is a picture of her 3 weeks ago. You guys can see the update. She's an amazing young woman, and she's spunky like my daughter was. Her liver or her kidney went to a 44-year-old man. We did receive communication from him that for the first time in 10 years, he is off dialysis. He'd never been able to go outside and play with his son, and now he can. And her liver went to an 8-month-old little girl who also is doing very well. And we were honored to have her on the 2017 Rose Parade float. This is the actual photograph that went down Colorado Boulevard, and they packaged it up for us and gave that to us as a gift for our family. If you're not already a donor, please sign up, because you never know whose life you're going to save. It may be a family member, it may be somebody across the country, and you don't know when organ and tissue donation is going to touch your life. How many of you guys actually know somebody that's either a donor or has received a donation? There's a lot of people. And unfortunately, there are 113,000 people currently awaiting organs. And in the state of California, we have 21,000 of them. So if you're not already a donor, not everyone can be a donor, but it is vitally important that you sign up. And most importantly, you let your friends and family know. During the worst days of their lives, they need to know that you want to be an organ donor, because it creates a lot of issues at times when people don't know and understand. So spread that message. I know Mayor Rigby is going to be joining us on the 29th of April at the Donate Life Run Walk at Cal State Fullerton. Go Team Caitlin. We have our team that we do. You can look us up, donate, whatever. We always appreciate it, and everything goes towards spreading the message of the importance of organ, eye, and tissue donation. So thank you to the City Council for recognizing April as Donate Life Month. I think this is my 3rd or 4th year doing it. It's something I'm very passionate about, of course. And I hope that you all have a conversation with your friends and family at some point about becoming a donor. Doesn't matter age, doesn't matter anything. If they need it, you can give it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for coming in and sharing that with us. I happen to know Alan on a personal relationship too, and he's been a great ambassador for the program and just a great example. But if you notice, he did say that I am going to be there for the run walk. Remember, there's part walk, so it's not all run. No. We'll see if I can finish without walking. We're going to move on to item number 5. Is he There he is, right in front of me. I'm sorry. Mr. Brian Medina, please.
Good evening. First off, there was many competitors at the Riverside County Science Fair Museum, or not museum, competition that placed a lot from Eastvale. Out of around 70 CNUSC competitors, around 40 to 45 of them all placed from Eastvale. So either it's the STEM Academy, Claire Barton, Eastvale Elementary, or River Heights and Augie. We beat out all the other like Corona and Norco, which was pretty amazing. The first person that got the highest reward was Dimple Garperi from the STEM Academy. She earned one of the 3 spots in the county to compete at the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair. Her project was the sodium, calcium, potassium pollution scrub. I hope those elements are correct because it's just the symbols, and I have not been in chemistry in a long time. And then a domestic approach to chemical carbon capture. And then community and regionals awards from the American Meteorological Society, Dimple Garperi from the STEM Academy. From the California Society for Biomedical Research, it was Kenny Nguyen. And he got a plaque and a $250 monetary award. From the Chemistry and Air Pollution Research Center at the California University of California, Riverside, it was Kayla Cunningham with Eastville Academy for a trophy and a $50 gift card. For the Intel Excellence in Computer Science was Peter Chang, Thomas Reif, and August Wetteroo from the ESM Academy. For the Mojave Environment Educational Consortium, it was Simple as well. She got a $50 gift card, a certificate, and a ribbon. For the NASA Earth Science System Award, it was Dimple once again with the ESM Academy. Naval Science Award, it was Andre Huerta from the ESM Academy. The Stockholm Junior Water Prize, it was Nicholas Almeida, Alexander Nguyen, and Nicholas Han from the ESM Academy. And then the gold medal winners are any winners from 6th to 12th grade that get to advance into the state competition automatically. And we had 14 of those just from the city of Eastvale. And it was Annalise Brasher from Claire Barton, Thomas Sherrill from Eastvale Elementary, James Glennie from Claire Barton, Zachary Brasher from Claire Barton, August Wetteroo from ESM Academy, Dimple Garperi from ESM Academy, Peter Chang from the ESM Academy, Kenny Nguyen from the ESM Academy, Thomas Wright from the ESM Academy, Faith Berry from the ESM Academy, Kayla Cunningham from the ESM Academy, Lana Lam from the ESM Academy, Wenu X Tang from the ESM Academy, and Jillian Labrador from the ESM Academy. And for our silver medal winners, it was Aiden Stinson from Claire Barton, Andrew Glennie from Claire Barton, Joel Lucera from Eastvale, Alexander Stewart from River Heights Intermediate, Jiwan Carr from ESM Academy, Christine Caneda from ESM Academy, Paige Prescott from ESM Academy, Samuel Alston from the ESM Academy, Serena Patel from the ESM Academy, Andre Huerta from the ESM Academy, Harshi Kasi Kalambali, I'm so sorry, ESM Academy as well, Jamal Karen from the ESM Academy, Natalie Hobson, Nicholas Tan, Nicholas Almeida, Noah Simpson, Ram Naveen, San Christy Balji, Brian Chen, Haley Hammond, and Jover Arisa, all from the ESM Academy as well. And from moving on from the ESM Academy and the science competition, 114 seniors from the class of 2019 at Roosevelt got accepted into UCR, which was it's one record for Roosevelt because it's so many seniors just for UCR, not counting our UC Berkeley and UCI and UCLA acceptance. And then UCR normally doesn't do this, but since we have so many seniors accepted and planning on going, they're coming in for a commitment or commitment signing letter and for their financial aid plan down to Roosevelt within the next 2 weeks. The senior awards night is May 16, where many of the local scholarships offered from different businesses are going to be presented to the seniors. And then the incoming freshmen from Augie and River Heights will be meeting with their counselors now until the end of the year. for their how to expect high school and how to be successful in it. And then our Powder Puff game, which includes our juniors and seniors game, is May 17th. And Haran Elementary had an Apex Fun Run. However, it's not a fun run, it's going to be more of a dance-a-thon, and it will be held tomorrow. And for the last of it, it will be prom is this Saturday for Eleanor Roosevelt High School at the California Science Museum. And that's all for now.
Great, thank you. Just as a side note, one of the winners from that science fair is actually here with us this evening, Mr. Thomas Reif, who was one of the award winners. So congratulations.
Good job.
Good job. And thank you, Brian. Is there any questions from the council?
I hope the list is just as long next year.
Yeah. That's awesome to see. So great job and thank you. Item number 6, public comments. Any member of the public may address the council on items within the council's subject matter jurisdiction, but which are not listed on this agenda during public comments. However, no action may be taken on matters that are not part of the posted agenda. We request comments made on the agenda be made at the time the item is considered, and that comments be limited to 3 minutes per person. Please address your comments to the council as a whole and do not engage in dialogue with individual council members, city staff, or members of the audience. Ms. Vasquez, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we have 2 speaker cards. The first one is Thomas Reif.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Reif, as you know, and I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Lots of stuff has happened since the last time I was here. If you remember, I talked about the Eastvale Service Club and our first street cleanup. We've actually adopted a second stretch of road, Chandler from Selby to Archibald, and we are currently responsible from Chandler from Archibald to Harrison. So we have 2 stretches of road. And we actually have a cleanup April 20th at 10 o'clock a.m. at the fire station. And bags and gloves are provided. And if you haven't already, please consider joining the Facebook page for more updates on service events in the city. And thank you very much for letting me speak to you this evening. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? I have a question. Well, Council Lormore, it looks like.
It might be the same
Go for it.
question. Tell us about your accomplishment that you just did with the science fair.
Yes, so my team and I, we
Yeah.
just competed at county, and basically our project, it aims to help people who are visually impaired. There's over 300 million people in the world who have this problem, and one of our teammates, Peter, is visually impaired. He has a problem with his retina, and he cannot see things far away. He can't focus on them, so he has to get really close to objects to be able to see clearly. And so he uses devices every day in class to help enhance the image that he sees. So he uses things like an iPad with a camera that zooms in. And we thought there was a better way to do it, something easier, something simpler. And that's when we created our device for the science fair. And we made a headset and 2 separate apps. One of them did text-to-speech and the other is Zoom. So you can put the headphone in front of your face and actually zoom in and to see what's in front of you a little bit closer.
It's awesome. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. I have a question for you different than that. Is there another project that you are working on with the service club?
Right now, I actually just met with Todd on this and the pastors in Eastvale. I really want to help people who are less fortunate than I am, and I want to collect the lost and found clothes from Rosa Parks, Augie Ramirez, and Roosevelt, and donating them to a local charity. I hope to find other young people that can reach out to other schools to do the same thing. Thank you again for Mayor Rigby for inviting me to the pastor's breakfast last week, and I learned a lot, and I hope to get to know all of them better.
So just as a reminder, I guess, don't want to put it out there so it becomes a huge thing and overwhelming, but if anyone is looking to donate anything or has any charities that can utilize some clothing, feel free to contact Thomas and he can help get that clothing to those charities. So thank you for all you're doing, Thomas. We really appreciate it. You're doing a great job. Councilmember Plott.
Thank you, Thomas. Hey, real quick, on the 20th, the street cleanup, that's at 10 a.m.
That is.
How long do these typically run? And the reason why I ask is there's a scholarship food fest going on at Roosevelt at 11. which I can always go later, but I didn't wonder about what's the time frame.
It usually lasts about an hour. If we have a lot
Okay.
of people, it goes a little faster.
Cool. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas also comes out and helps the Kiwanis Club on the first Saturday of every month do our street cleanup as well, so the kids everywhere. Thanks, Thomas.
Ms. Vasquez, do we have any other public comments?
Yes, we have Bill Van Leeuwen.
Mayor Rigby and the council members. My name is Bill Van Leeuwen. My wife and I have resided at 13,000 Citrus, which we've resided at that location for 45 years. It's our understanding that the city has purchased a property at 13,200 and therefore has become our new neighbors. My wife and I welcome you to our corner of the world, and it's kind of a nice corner to live in. I assume that you will soon be attending to the landscaping of the property is starting to look kind of run down. So that has an effect upon the entrance to our place. I'd also like to suggest that you place a stop sign at the exit. We had a near accident the other day. As they left that property, they were flying out of there without paying any attention. My wife and I were tending to the garden right there, and they just about hit us. So I think that you're gonna have to put a stop sign that they exit. Then on another note, given the attitudes and the announcements from the governor's office regarding the housing needs of the state of California, I would like to suggest to the council that our property be reinstated to the county's designation of our property in their general plan. That was not transferred to the city, even though the city adopted the county's general plan at the time of incorporation. It's been a problem, and it needs to be resolved. And with the pressure starting to come down from the governor's office, it might be a good time to relook at this and put it back where it belongs. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. I think we're good. Thanks, Bill. Ms. Vasquez,
That was the last card.
great. We'll move on to item number 7, the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are.
Mayor Rigby, if I could just respond one quick thing. We have to go through a procurement process to get a maintenance crew out there. And so we're working on that right now to take care of the landscaping. I almost brought up my riding lawnmower to take care of it by myself, but we do recognize that with all the rain we got and the nice sunshine we're getting, that things are growing pretty fast out there. So we will be on top of it here soon.
Thank you. Item number 7 is the consent calendar, and all matters on the consent calendar are considered routine and are to be approved with one motion unless a council member, staff member, or member of the public requests separate action on a specific item. Ms. Vasquez, have any members of the public or staff requested to pull any items?
No, sir.
Council, do you wish to pull any items? Then I would look for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Ms. Vasquez, please.
I'm sorry, who did the first motion on that?
Councilmember, sorry.
Councilmember Yao?
Yes.
Councilmember Lorimore?
Aye.
Councilmember Tesari? Mayor Pro Tem Plot?
Yes.
Mayor Rigby?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to item 8, public hearings, which we have no public hearings this evening. So we will move on to, we're going to skip item number 9 for right now. We'll move on to item number 10, city manager and city staff report.
This is the fastest we've ever gotten to the city manager report. On Thursday, April 18th, I believe it is, the Norco College President's Dinner will be occurring, and there's some of you that will be joining us. Our council member, Jocelyn Yao, will be awarded Alumni of the Year at Norco College that night, along with, who's the other word that the school district is receiving an award. And then we are working to develop some dates for the workshop that you requested last council meeting. and we're working to finalize those. I think we're going to do those workshops after we adopt the council budget. So we're going to focus on getting the budget done first, and then we'll come back and do the public workshops on the feasibility of our law enforcement as well as a sales tax initiative. And we'll have two separate individual workshops on each one of those. We also are in the process of the mural that you approved in January or February to start. We'd like to create an ad hoc committee for arts. And so if there are two council members that would like to be on that ad hoc committee to provide feedback to staff on the mural project as well as art, that would be greatly appreciated. We also in the past have had a civic center ad hoc committee made up of two council members, and we might have an opportunity to start thinking about that, getting the civic center and the library going on. I'll be sharing more about that in 221s coming up, but we might also consider which two council members would like to sit on that. It was a previous ad hoc committee or a group that was a few years ago, but I don't think it exists, or all the people that served on that are still on the council, so we might want to do that. And then just keeping everybody in the loop with the SC transmission line issue going on. We have Ontario, Harupa Valley, and Norco that have reached out to us from their elected officials and city managers, and they would like two council members to participate in that. And I believe one of the council members from Harupa Valley had already reached out to Jocelyn. They want to meet during the day, and so we're going to have to find a time to do that. So we have an arts ad hoc, a civic center ad hoc, and then we need two council members, and we don't need to create an ad hoc. It's just because we've already, as a council, taken a position to tell the PUC to underground those utilities, and the EIR says it is a feasible option and the environmentally superior option, and so we're just trying to get the PUC to do the right thing in our communities with the power lines that are going through our region. Wanted to update you on the public vendor, street vendor ordinance. We currently have about 3 to 4 street vendors in our community. One of them has completed all the process, and the other 3 have been educated on the process and are starting the process. And so we're working with them to complete that. And we're one of their biggest hurdles is the County Department of Health food or handling ordinance. But we are working with them to get their business registrations, and then they need that permit to get their street vending ordinance from the city, or permit from the city. And so we're working on that, and Community Enhancement and Safety Team has been out meeting with them regularly to make sure that they're doing their due diligence to get that in place. Our new ad in
I have a question on that. Are
Yes,
they
sir.
allowed to vend on the street without that if they're in process?
I'll let the attorney speak to that. There is a period in that, and I don't.
No, they're not allowed to vend on the street unless they've secured their business registration and their street vendor permit.
Okay.
And to get the street vendor permit, they need the county health permit. So, the one that is currently in front of Home Depot has a street vending permit from the city, and so that is, to my knowledge, the only one that has completed all the process. We have our first national economic development ad in the Western real estate, and it's a nice flyer. It's on my desk, so I should have brought it in here, but I didn't. Earlier this week, a number of us got a tour of the Walmart supply warehouse that's just up the street behind Granger's, or north of Granger's on Hamner. They took over the old Schneider facility, who used to contract with them, and so they hired approximately 350 associates from Schneider, and they're looking to grow it to over 900 employees. And so if you are looking for a job in Eastvale and you would like to be part of the Walmart team, they have great college incentive fees programs and a number of different investments in their employees, and they pay higher than any other person in the region. At least that's what they shared with us. So, and we're excited to have them growing their business in Eastvale. The CERT classes are on May 3rd through May 5th that weekend, and we already have 26 registered for that. So if you're interested in doing the CERT program. And then while I was on vacation, we had a big blackout in this area that SCE didn't even know about. And so it wasn't communicated to our fire department until all the fire alarms and the burglar alarms started going off in all our businesses and homes in our community. And our law enforcement and fire department were responding as quickly as they could. CAL FIRE deployed 10 to 15 extra fire units into our area and community to help. And our law enforcement was responding to a lot of collisions around our signals and our intersections. We realized that we have a number of residents on oxygen in our community, and so it becomes a medical emergency when the power goes off. And so, but many of our traffic signals worked flawlessly because we have battery backups in our traffic signals. We did find one at Riverbend and Hamner that wasn't functioning correctly, and we sent public works teams out there, but we were the ones that our law enforcement and fire were the ones that communicated with SCE that the entire 14,000 homes west of Hamner in the region and Chino and Ontario were out of power. And so, but they quickly got that back up and running later that night. And I think all 65,000 residents posted on Let's Talk Eastvale. So, I think even one person said, for the three of you that haven't, I'll post for you. So May 8th is
on that real quick too, thank you to Ernie and to Joe and to our law enforcement and fire for everything you did for communicating and getting that taken care of and resolved quickly. So thank you.
Yes, it was a great coordinated effort. And even MCE was responding to that as well. So on May 8th, we have a community cleanup. So if you've been doing spring cleaning or you would like to do some spring cleaning between now and May 8th, we will have a great cleanup where lots of people in our community come and drop off things that are cluttering their garages and homes and backyards and side yards and cars and whatever. So if you need to drop stuff off, we'll have a big old program on May 8th. For the community cleanup, and it's a great way to get rid of a whole bunch of bulky stuff. So book your U-Haul and trailers right now to drop them off, or borrow your friend's truck. And then later tonight,
Ryan, is that May 8th?
18th.
Okay.
18th. Sorry, May 18th. Sorry.
Thank you.
And then coming up here, we're going to have our AB 1234 ethics training. And so we're going to have the great Erica Vega, our city attorney, who is an expert in ethics in the state of California and does these trainings all over. We will have her doing a guest presentation for us tonight. But other than that, I think that's about it.
Great, thank you. Then we will move on to item number 11, City Council Communications and Committee Reports. We'll start off with committee reports. League of California Cities.
Yes. Okay, so we just had on Monday for the Riverside Division, we had our executive committee meeting. At that meeting, it was decided upon a replacement for the West Valley or West County vacancy was filled, and that was filled by a council member from the city of Canyon Lake. And also division related, on May 13th, the division meeting is going to be taking place in Palm Desert at the Living Desert. The last time was that they're trying, usually we go back and forth between West and East County, meaning the desert. But we're doing two in a row because in the summertime, it gets really hot out in the desert and you don't want to go there. So that meeting is going to be taking place on the 13th. In fact, the people from the desert we're begging to not have it in the desert, but have it on the west side as a way to escape. Related to that, but at the state level, I think it says here today is the cutoff, but there's going to be a Legislative Action Day preview webinar taking place tomorrow that you can jump on, but the registration deadline is today, and that'll be taking place tomorrow. And I don't have what time it starts here, but you can go on to the league's website and jump onto that. Legislative Action Day, the Legislative Action Day preview is a precursor to the Legislative Action Day, which will be taking place in Sacramento, April 24th. As of yesterday, there were a total of 176 people that had said they are going to attend. Pre-registration deadline is April 16th. And related to Monday's meeting, that with the executive committee, one bill was discussed, and that is Assembly Bill 854, and that is being put forward by Assemblymember Mays, and this is in relation to the Imperial Irrigation District. And this bill that I found it's fascinating is to go through and currently the Imperial Irrigation District provides electricity to the east end of the Coachella Valley, and 60% of Imperial Irrigation District's electricity customers reside in Riverside County. However, as a result, and this was an agreement that was entered into 100 years ago, or 85 years ago, for a period of 100 years. In that it is, by its name, Imperial Irrigation District, it is entirely within Imperial, the makeup of its board. So even though the majority of its customers are in Riverside County, they do not have any elected representation. As a result, there's a piece of legislation going forward to upend that, and they propose to put 6 members, all of whom reside in Riverside County, and add that to the board currently of 5 from Imperial. So that is being put forward, and the board was asked to weigh in on that, and the board did endorse the bill, right in support of the bill. So that concludes my report for the League of Cities.
Thank you. Regarding the Ledge Action Day on the 24th,
Yes.
is anyone planning on going to that?
The 24th, just so you all know, is the same day as our council meeting. I will not, I am not, I don't know if anybody else is.
Is anyone planning or able, willing, want to go to that?
I will be there the following day for the state league board meeting, but I view our time here as important, so
Okay.
I'm not doing that
No,
the day before.
I agree. Perfect, thank you. If you want to continue for us with SCAG?
Yes, so we had our meeting on April 4th for SCAG, that's Southern California Association of Governments. The district here is District 4. It encompasses the city of Eastvale, Jurupa Valley, and Norco. Each district has approximately 200,000 people in it. If a city is of that amount, then it is its own district. And at that meeting, an exciting thing happened. We appointed an executive director. His name is Kome Ajise, and great guy. He is the former number 2 for all of Caltrans. So he was second in command at Caltrans before he came to SCAG. We picked him up from internally. He's been with SCAG for 17 months as head of planning. And very smart guy. Every time I see him, I tell him he's got to move to Eastvale, and I'm going to get him one of these days. He's going to agree. But his wife is in agreement. Currently, anyway. Because he just started the job, and he's from Sacramento area, she's still living up there, and he's commuting on the weekends up north, so he's got to find a place to live, and I give him your name, Todd, so we're gonna get this. So he was just appointed and a great find, and I think it will do well for the region. Also, at this meeting, we had our new officers, executive officers, were unanimously approved. And so Bill Yon of Big Bear, he's going to be president this next year. And in May, he will be officially installed at the General Assembly, which I believe all of you know about. So that's May 1st through 3rd, and that is out in the desert. The gentleman right after him, who is going to be the vice president, is Randon Lena Murrieta, and then also out of Long Beach, newly selected is Rex Richardson. So this is a good thing. SCAG is 191 cities in Southern California, and that is what it's comprised. I'm sorry, not 191 cities. Yes, 191 cities in Southern California. And the regional council is the main body that those individuals I just mentioned lead. However, in the 6-county region, you do have, if you listen to those cities, they are all relatively near to home, which is a good thing in terms of over the next 3 years, the trajectory of where SCAG will likely be focusing a lot of its energies. So we have 2 from the Inland Empire, which is wonderful. And the one that is just stepping down is also from Ontario, our neighbor to the north, who was president this past year. I'm getting there, I promise. I did also send this information to you guys via email. So the Regional Assembly is going to be, General Assembly is going to be taking place on May 1st through 3rd, and that's going to be out in the Palm Desert. And also on the 1st, maybe of interest, we have a traffic safety leadership symposium taking place. So a lot of education on that first day, if you are able to make it. Also, I know that we have maybe a couple people in the room, but hopefully we can also put this out on social media. The region's high school and community college students are eligible, those from the SCAG region are eligible to apply for 7 scholarships that are going to be going up. And each scholarship is available, will receive $4,000, and more than this, a 2-week internship is associated with that. And that is to develop long-term goals and help students for career goals. And so what that will mean if a student does win is that they will be placed into a local planning agency or council of governments. And so maybe if something of interest, you can check that out at SCAG, www.scag.ca.gov/scholarships. Just go to the SCAG website, look up scholarships, it'll be on there. And concludes my report for SCAG.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a reminder, with the conference coming up, if you're able to make it, that'd be great. And if you have not confirmed with Stephanie, let her know and she'll help with accommodations. Councilmember Plot.
Yeah, I have one question, Councilman Laura Moore. I know on the 2nd, we have our national prayer day at New Day Church. It's about at 8 a.m. Do we know when the first actual General Assembly meeting starts on that day, the SCAG conference?
I need to get that. I know that it is out there, it's on the website, and it has always been a conflict every year, and it's very frustrating. That's why I have not been at the past couple of them, because I'm the representative for our 3 cities out there. So yes, you make a very valid point. But I'll go over it with you.
I stand corrected. It's actually 7 a.m. I said 8. I meant 7 o'clock.
The last few years, we've been able to go to, or last year we went to the prayer breakfast and then we hustled out there and got out there and we didn't miss too much.
I think on that day, it's roughly about 10 o'clock is the General Assembly meeting.
Yeah.
And yeah, with it starting at 7, it's done by 8:30. Just don't get pulled over by the CHP. All right, moving on to WRCOG.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start off with my Public Safety Policy Committee report from the League of California Cities First. We had several pieces of legislation we voted on for recommendations to the for the league. One of them was AB 266, which was a tax credit for attic vents. That was a fire one. It would allow homeowners to offset the purchase and installation of attic vent closures for their homes with the intent of preventing spread of residential fires. We voted to approve that or to support it. 1096, Assembly Bill by Assemblymember Melendez was concealed carry. And basically, it would require, instead of authorize a county sheriff or a chief of police to issue a license to carry a handgun, if good cause exists for the issuance of the applicant's safeties, or if the applicant satisfies other enumerated criteria. The bill would also define the term good cause with the intent of clarifying the requirements for concealed carry weapons license applications. And we voted to oppose that. We didn't like the language and the taking away of local control from various sheriffs and police chiefs. And another provision in it was that any sheriff of a county with a population of less than 200,000 their permits would not allow their residents to carry outside of that particular county. So it's kind of like making them a second-class sheriff, because their population isn't big enough, so we voted to oppose that. And the other big one was Senate Bill 230, which deals with police use of force. I was opposed to this, but the committee voted to support it, and they voted to support it with the condition that Assembly Bill 931, which was introduced last year, would be forever agreed upon to ever be submitted again for passage as a piece of legislation. That was what they would support 230 if the assembly member who sponsored 931 would agree to never try to get it passed again. Because that was the one that was really, it was changing the language of the use of force for police officers from objectively reasonable to necessary. So, which would have made it very easy to armchair quarterback after the fact, and more easily prosecute police officers for doing their job. And I felt that this one actually does the same thing. They said it would require all law enforcement agencies to maintain a policy that provides guidelines on the use of force. They already do. It will require each agency to make their use of force policy accessible to the public. I believe most of them already do. The bill would refine the circumstances under which a homicide by a peace officer is justifiable, and that's where I have an issue. And it would require the Post Commission to implement periodic officer training and develop uniform standards and guidelines. So, like I said, we did vote to support it with the condition, but I was opposed. Moving on to WRCOG, Western Riverside Council of Governments. We voted to authorize Twain Commercial Financial Company to work with PACE to finance commercial operations, and also agreed to extend those out to 30 years. And it now allows commercial PACE participants to refinance, which they weren't allowed to do. It was only for residential prior to that. TUMP program activities, we approved the 2019 Central Zone Transportation Improvement Program, which is TIP, with support from other agencies in the Central Zone Committee, which is Moreno Valley, Paris, and Menifee, along with the County of Riverside. The TUMP network is a list of projects that can be funded with TUMP funds, broken into two general categories. There was a new policy which will allow developers to submit their payments electronically. I know we were doing some electronic payments by the cities. We were able to do that, but now the developers can actually submit theirs electronically. And just one of the things that we went over some stats on the diff. Where is it at? Forgive me. It's but the diff fees for a residential project, for a residential structure, are about $48,000 of that job. And for a that's for a single family structure, and for a multi-unit, it amounts to about $30,000 per unit. So I just thought that was kind of crazy. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clint's looking for some assistance at the BIA.
Just on those two bills, just for our residents' information, those can put our law enforcement at risk, so just beware. It's SB 230 and AB 941, so if you have any input, feel free to contact your assembly member, Sabrina Cervantes, and make sure that she knows how you feel. So
As
and
well as Senator Roth.
Senator Roth also, yeah, thank you. So
And one of the things that I find, with this redefining of the use of force for law enforcement, it's troubling, because I think of an example. There was one in Long Beach several years ago where a gentleman was sitting on the porch. It was dusk, so all you could see really was his just his silhouette. And police came and contacted him because somebody had complained about his behavior. And when he was confronted by the police, he pointed what they thought was a gun at him, and they shot him and killed him. And when they went to check him, he was holding one of those garden hoses, you know, the one that you squeeze to get the water out. Looks just like a gun in the dark. Well, that would be a case where the term necessary, you could look back and go, well, it wasn't necessary. So now those police officers could be held liable and be prosecuted. So rather than objectively reasonable, which what would a reasonable person believe at the time that was happening? So that's one of the things that's they're trying to change it at the the state level, and it's really going to do exactly what the mayor said. It's going to endanger law enforcement officers.
my last thing on it, it's gonna make it so law enforcement's gonna have to react rather than be proactive. And it'll just put them in danger. It'll make it so that they can't shoot until they're shot at. And by the time they're shot at, it may be too late. So, moving on to RTA, Riverside Transit Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we actually meet tomorrow, what we call our T-Now chapter there. The RTA is also made up of regional chapters to where we can try to make local impact on ridership and more awareness of the RTA. But one of the things I just wanted to bring up from our last meeting, and I chaired that committee, is the way we've kind of identified to reach out to residents to make people aware of the bus system that we have and the ridership, and just trying to get that name out there. And we represent Arupa Valley, Eastvale, Norco, Corona, and kind of part of that Temescal Valley area. So what we've done is we've created about 6 events that are regional events that we attend, all different types of events, to where we're gonna have a presence there and go. So one of the first one that we're gonna be doing is in Norco. It's Norco Horse Week, which is on April 13th. And we will be bringing out the trolley. It's kind of the old school trolley going down. And again, it's just to kind of create more awareness to get people more familiar with the ridership. So as these other events come up, we have National Night Out that we're going to be at, and the Temescal Valley Community Fair. We have the Santa Bus Ride, which Ike Bootsma does. That's kind of how we finish it off in December with that. So we just try to create more awareness. But Norco Horse Week, April 13th, 10 a.m. We'll be out in the trolley. So come on out. It's a great time.
That's also the cow chip tossing event, right? Or is that?
No, that's the National Day of the American Cowboy.
Oh, okay.
That's a great event.
Okay.
That's a really good event.
You have
You have two cow chip winners right here. Yeah.
I think the last 2 years.
Eastvale held it 2 years in a row.
So way to go, Eastvale.
It'll be a third year. It will guarantee it'll be a third year. You know, I promise we're not slinging cow chips from the dais either. So everything's real and true up here.
You're safe. Western Community Energy, we had a meeting today. And we just basically went over kind of the marketing plan and the policy handbook that's being put together. So you're going to see a lot more marketing that's going to start coming out regarding Western Community Energy and what that is. If you have any questions about specifics of it, you feel free to contact me directly. Northwest Mosquito and Vector Control District.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Riverside County Transportation Commission.
Yes, we had our meeting this morning, and two things. A couple meetings ago, there was, well, for Eastvale, when I reported out on what happened at commission meeting last month, there was talk about the call boxes, and call boxes are very expensive to maintain, and there is a project coming down the line where they have to be upgraded because the current technology, cell technology in it, no longer will be supported by carriers. And so as part of that, they started looking at the different call boxes, the usage that they have. And some of these call boxes were receiving one call a year, maybe 2 calls a year. And things have changed because many of us carry around cell phones now. And if you don't have a cell phone, somebody driving by might call on your behalf that somebody's on the side of the road. Anyway, so long and short of it is, at least in Western Riverside County, you're really not going to be seeing these these call boxes on the side of the road anymore as time moves on. If on the eastern side of the county, in very rural places, they will still be available, and the spacing varies on them, but that was they came back after answering some questions for the board and brought forward for approval the reduction plan, and it looks like it's on its way out across the county, but still in rural areas they will maintain. Another bill that came up for discussion at the meeting was Assembly Bill 626 by Quirk Silva, and it is the bill was about transparency and conflict of interest, which is one that one intuitively would always vote in favor of. But these authors, they actually turn it on its head, and it is rather deceiving how they go about it. But what they end up doing, they change the language, they strike out all the language, and say that you are not in conflict if you are, and then they put everybody that would have been possibly in conflict with transportation projects, engineers, etc. So, and the bill just happens to be sponsored by the Engineering Association of America, or of it's something along those lines. But the committee voted to oppose unless amended, and there were suggestions by the board as to how it could be amended, but we'll see if the author is willing to work with the agency on that. So that concludes the report for RCTC.
Thank you. Western Riverside County Regional Conservation Agency.
We had our meeting last Monday, and the species of the month, it's bobcat. And I'm sure everyone knows what bobcat looks like by now. They are members of the cat family, and you can find them here in our county, in Riverside County, and their lifespan is about 7 years. But everything, if you want to learn more about it, it's on their website, RCA, and they have a whole presentation on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. JCSD.
No comments as of now. We haven't had a meeting. I think we have a meeting next month.
Which reminds me of, we need to see if we can maybe reschedule that meeting, because that's during the same time as the California Contracts Conference. So maybe between you and I, if we can coordinate to have that rescheduled a different day. Finance Committee.
We will have myself and Councilmember Tessari will be meeting next Tuesday with staff to have our finance committee. So there's no update as of yet.
Great, thank you. Moving on to any additional council comments. Councilmember Sorry?
Councilman Lorimer just mentioned about how many pieces of legislation, there's all these different ones coming down, and we have the most prolific state legislature in the country, probably in the world. It's ridiculous. It's all about just pushing out piece of legislation after legislation after legislation, and that deals with the same stuff over and over again. They don't give a chance for the cities to actually implement the policy they're ordering us to carry out, and they don't even know what the results are going to be. So there's no time for anything to actually be digested to see if whoever's idea came 2 years ago is actually going to have the results they were hoping to, because they're just piggybacking one piece and dealing with the same issue. I think last year there were 60 bills dealing specifically with housing and zoning. It's crazy. It's just one after another. So you just can't get anything. I feel for you, Erica.
There's like 2,043 bills this year.
Yeah, it's insane. So I'm sorry. I just had to say that. Call your assemblyman and your assembly member and your senator and tell them to just cease and desist for a while.
Thank you. Councilmember Yao?
No, we have the 5K run and walk this Sunday at Eastville Community Center. So if anyone who is interested in that, feel free to join us. And as many of you know, all council members, we are required to receive ethics training every 2 years. I'm a little bit ahead of the game. I was able to complete my training on February 1st. It was a Friday morning, and Erica here, our city attorney, gave me I believe it was a 2-hour training on ethics. So I will be dismissed by our city attorney, and I won't be attending the training later on this one. But just FYI, I did my training on February 1st at around 8 a.m. and the city staff has my certificates for review.
I have a question. Erica, would you be okay if she sat through it just for fun?
I'm not stepping into that one.
That's good. That's good. That is good. That's fun.
Councilmember Lorimer?
I need water, actually. I'm good. No comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Plott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so myself and our city manager, Brian Jones, we sit on a committee. It's called the President's Advisory Board at Norco College. And Dr. Brian Reese was the president of Norco College, and his staff been working on an enormous project, and still, it's got some legs, but it still has some work to do. I wanted to bring, it's the first time I've actually brought it up, because the software for it is starting to be complete, but it's a really awesome program, and I think it'll help a lot of our veterans in the military. And what it is, they're working on a program called MAP, and it's called the Military Articulation Program. And what it is, currently how it exists right now is, with whichever 4 branches of the military, when you're in some type of ranking or system, there's some type of work that you're doing in that, and you're learning a certain skill set. And so what happens is that when they send that over, when you get over to college, the problem is they don't transfer an actual college credits. You might get a PE credit or something. It's kind of embarrassing to really think about, because a lot of these people that get their training in the military, they're very well equipped and understand the knowledge of whatever study they're looking at. And so what this program is, it's very vast in data. It is massive data. And Norco is heading this among a lot of the higher educations. There are a lot of higher educations that are involved in this, but Norco is the head on this. And what it is they're taking all curriculums of every class that exists, and particularly in California, and they're matching it with every type of position in the military, any type of study in the military. And what they're doing is every curriculum is being determined by the staff and by the professors to try to find matches. So instead of getting no units to maybe 3 units, the idea is a person coming out of the military could possibly get a semester or even a year, and I've heard even up to even more units than that in an entire year. So it's really making a wrong a right, and really, because there's no reason why a person that's gone through the military needs to go take another class because it doesn't transfer over. And so it's something to work on. It's not near completion, But I just want to make everyone aware of this. I think it's an awesome program it's huge. When you look at it, it's not being done, and there's no program that we understand in the entire nation that actually has this type of program. So, and it's right in our, it's right in our neighboring city it's being done at. So I just kind of wanted to, so there's a lot more details to it, there's a lot more semantics to it, but I just kind of want to give an overall brush of it, just so you know that you guys are aware of that. So, pretty cool. It's a pretty cool program, though. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I had a question for
Yeah, go for
Councilman
it.
Platt. But before I ask my question, yeah, it's a great program. As it exists today, you could spend 20 years serving in the military, and the only thing you get for college if you go apply is your physical education. That's it. Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
It is. It's like you get 2 credit or 1 or 2 credits.
It's literally, it's a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way we kind of.
And my question for you is there a, like a sunset on that? Because I'm pretty old.
Yeah, I don't even, as far as and I can ask Dr. Reese, but we've had several meetings on this, and there's been no discussion of a sunset like that. I think it's open to anybody in the military. If you served in whatever you did in your position, it will automate, it'll automate to what credits you are already good for. So it'll just be automatic.
Okay.
And
I thought it had a
you did
percentage
this,
of gray hairs.
huh?
I thought there was a percentage of gray hairs.
Yeah, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. But as far as I understand it, I can get an
Or
answer
just
for you.
hair. Let's not talk about hair.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, it's a sensitive, it's a very sensitive subject. No, I can find that answer, but I would take a shot and say there is no sunset on this, so I think you're fine. Yep.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things. Let me pull this back up. Just as a reminder, May 16th is the start of the California Contract Cities Municipal Seminar. So if you have not registered, if you're interested in going to that, contact Stephanie and she can help with registration and accommodations for that. I attended about a week or so ago the League Policy Committee for Community Services. There were 2 main speakers. There was no action items that were before us and no action was taken. So there was 2 speakers. One talked about senior housing and the need for senior housing and the impacts of senior housing. Just a couple of interesting things, reminders. The senior housing has a lower impact for parking, lower impact typically for crime, lower impact typically for schooling. So if you know of any, especially within our area, we don't have any senior housing right now. So that's one thing that may be an interest for us to look further into. The other thing that was discussed a lot was the mayor of Costa Mesa shared they have I believe it's about a 70-bed homeless shelter facility that's coming online soon. They have a lot of resources there in Costa Mesa, which is great. So I'm glad that they have the resources there in Costa Mesa. Hint, hint, we have 0 homeless here. So homeless, there are some resources in Costa Mesa. So we aren't going to send them there, but we'll let them know about those resources. A couple of just items. Councilmember Yao did mention the Mary Kay 5K this weekend coming up on Sunday. There is also a Cops and Clergy meeting that's coming up on April 25th. So any clergy that are interested, contact, I believe it's Lieutenant Young at the Hoopa Valley Station, and he can help you get in for that meeting on the 25th. Also on the 25th is a CNUSD annual tribute to education award ceremony. So if anyone's available to attend that to support our school district, that'd be great. And then last but not least, there is the Chamber, we did mention it briefly, the Chamber National Day of Prayer breakfast is on May 2nd, 7 a.m. If you're interested in attending that is a ticketed event. So make sure that you can visit the Chamber's website and purchase your tickets there. Always a great event. I think the last couple of years they've had to turn people away at the end because it's sold out. So if you're interested, make sure you sign up for that. The last thing I just wanted to ask, or actually before I get to that, I was contacted by, spoke with the mayor of Hoopa Valley this afternoon, and we were talking about the overpass, the Limonite interchange that's going on. And he was talking about that they have set aside some dollars in their upcoming budget for the synchronization of the lights. to make sure that everything's synchronized all the way from Harupa Valley onto the interchange into Eastville. So since we're doing this project, I just want to bring it up that if we need to set aside something for budget as we're doing budget, I think now would probably be a good time, as well as a good time to contact and coordinate with Harupa Valley, as well as what's happening with the interchange, so that we don't do this nice big interchange and then all of a sudden we're stopped by lights that are making it not synchronizing properly. So maybe if we can look into that, just to make sure that we have the best interchange when it's opened up. The last thing I just wanted to ask our city manager, Brian, you mentioned about the ad hoc committees. Do we need to assign those out right now, do you think?
If you are able and willing to, that it'd be helpful to keep things moving forward, and then we can start working with those specific council members, because we have some opportunities that might
Okay.
present themselves.
I know we're running late on time. Let's do that real quick. For the mural project, is there anyone that would be interested in participating in that? That would be with the Two Hills. Councilmember, sorry? Councilmember Lorimer? Thank you. And then, who was on the previous Civic Center? I know it was Adam and Clint. If you don't mind, Clint, were you? Do you want to be on that still? Sure. Clint? If you don't want to, I will.
I'm good with it, but, and I know that Jocelyn has an interest in the libraries.
I'll gladly take that.
Okay. Just as a reminder too, part of these commitments are during the day, so we need to make sure that we're available for staff so that we make it accommodating. So once we're assigned to these, if you have conflicts, let us know sooner rather than later so we can make sure that these are productive meetings and things are moving forward. So would you be able and willing?
Yes.
And then Clint or Joe, either one. Rock, paper, scissors? Okay. So we have Jocelyn and Joe, and then the power lines.
There's no need for an ad hoc. I
No
just need
ad
to
hoc.
identify 2 council members.
Okay. So that won't be an ad hoc, that'll just be 2 council members there.
No, the council already adopted a resolution formally in 2016 opposing the above ground lines. So we already have clear direction. As we coordinate with our neighboring jurisdictions, if we need more specific direction from you, we'll bring that back at a later time. But we just wanted to update you to know that we're still actively working on it, because we've been notified that the CPUC will probably be making its decision sometime soon, though they haven't formally announced a date yet.
So we don't need an ad hoc, but do we need a point of contact person?
We just
within the
need 2
council?
council members that would like to meet with other council members from other cities. Because other cities are reaching out to us to identify 2 council members.
Just discussion points.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Plott.
Yeah,
and-
I'd like to be involved in that. It runs along my district on that Hellman, so I absolutely would love to be involved in that.
Okay.
This one's specifically for the ones going down the I-15 corridor, but it's still correlation of.
Yeah, either
the
way,
whole thing,
still
yeah.
be involved. Because we'll need support from the other cities as well.
Yeah.
There's multiple lines in the region.
I think the ones that they're focusing on, because it's kind of being head by Harupa Valley, is the I-15 corridor lines. But it's multiple. I mean, since we're kind of surrounded on both sides with those. Is there anyone else that would like to be part of that? If not, I will. All right. Councilmember Plott and myself. All right, done. Thank you. We're going to move on to item.
So for the library, just to recap, for the library and Civic Center, we have Joe and Jocelyn. For the art, we have Joe and Clint. And for the power, we have Todd and Brandon.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We're gonna move on to item number 9, which is city council business, and 9.1 is AB 1234, ethics training. This is an ethics training course, so you're more than welcome to stick around and enjoy this presentation. But we totally understand if you don't want to stick around and enjoy a 2-hour presentation. So thank you for being here. And we'll turn it over to our city attorney.
Yes, I'm just waiting for Stephanie to get the presentation up. There we go. Okay. So thank you, Mayor and Council members, for sticking around for this training this evening. So I'm going to do my best to go through this at a quick pace because it is required to be 2 hours long, but it actually covers a lot in that 2 hours. So I try to build in a little bit of time for questions if you have questions, so feel free to answer them. But otherwise, I will just move right along. So the presentation is required by Assembly Bill 1234, which was approved in 2005 and went into effect in 2006. It requires ethics training for local agency officials, which is members of legislative bodies that receive compensation or reimbursement for expenses, and then any employees who are designated by their agency as required to receive the training. If you're new, you have to receive the training within your first year, and then thereafter it's every 2 years. As Councilmember Yao mentioned, I gave this identical training in February at the League's New Mayors and Council Members Academy, and she was there for that. So no need for her to sit through it again. So why is ethics training needed? It seems pretty obvious. It's the headlines, especially the city of Bell, which was not just local news, it was national news. Vernon and other cities have all been hit with major scandals related to ethics. So the legislature decided in their infinite wisdom to mandate ethics training for all local agency officials. Notice local agency officials, it doesn't apply to state officials. So really what we go over here is the golden rule, which is that when you have a public office, the public expects you to act ethically, whether or not it's required by law. So I really want to focus on the fact that this ethics training really goes over and focuses on by law legal compliance, regulatory compliance. However, ethics is much broader than that, and it's about a lot more than just legal compliance. So as time permits, I sort of touch on general ethical principles at the end. What AB 1234 requires me to go over are these 4 different categories of laws. First will be perks of office, which include gifts, governmental transparency, so Brown Act and other disclosure laws, personal financial gain, which are conflicts of interest laws, and fair process. So we'll just jump right into it and let you know that, this goal of this training is to be safe, right? Because it's kind of like getting sprayed in the face with water. It's a lot to take in all at once. So if there's anything you take in from this training, I want you to remember just to learn to spot the issues, ask for help, focus on more than just legal compliance. What are your community's expectations in terms of ethics? And then to exercise those ethics in practice. And so this gift was selected before Councilmember Desari decided to use that example a little bit ago of a water hose, unfortunately. But okay.
Do you have copyright laws of that video of me?
Yeah, that's a childhood home video of Brian. There we go. Okay. So we're going to run right into the perks of office section, and we'll spend a good amount of time discussing gifts, as it tends to be one of the areas where we get the most questions. It also tends to be one of the more complex areas in terms of the nuances of the regulations. So as you all know, in a calendar year, you can only accept up to a certain dollar amount of gifts from a single source, and those aggregate over the course of a year. So it's not just a one-off gift, it can be multiple small gifts. For 2019, that gift limit is $500. The FPPC sets the limits, and they tend to increase them by $10 or so every year, every other year, something along those lines. And then any gift that's $50 or more needs to be disclosed on your Form 700. So $50 is the disclosure threshold, $500 is the absolute maximum that you can receive in 2019. So what is a gift? It's really anything that gives you a benefit where you haven't provided some sort of good or service of equal or greater value in return. So it's not just money or physical gifts. It could be services, activities, meals, tickets, rebates, discounts, travel. It could really be anything as long as you haven't provided some sort of reciprocal compensation for what you've received. and you receive the gift at the time you take possession of it or exercise any control over it, which includes throwing it away. So that's something that most people don't always realize, is that you can give a gift back, you can donate a gift to a charitable organization, but if you decide to throw it away, that's considered exercising control over it, and so technically it's still a reportable gift. Or if you regift it to someone else. So an example here that I like to give.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you receive something and you happen to just leave it for anyone to take anything from it?
Well,
You
that
don't
would
actually
be
take it. You know what I mean?
exercising control over it. That would be exercising control over the gift. Correct. So if it's valued at more than $50, it would still be something that you would need to report. Yeah. I guess unless you leave it for a charitable organization, in which case then you could get around having to report it. But if you're just leaving it, say, at City Hall for all the city employees, I don't know that that would qualify necessarily. Yeah. There's a lot of nuances here, though, where a lot of times those things are actually gifts to the city and not just gifts to individual council members as well. So something to think about. So an example I like to give is dinners and lunches, because it's something that was actually a real gray area for a really long time, and the FPPC updated their rules a few years ago. So in this example, you see a consulting company where multiple people from the same company are taking you out to dinner at least 2 times a month. So would a gift happen there? And assuming that the company is actually paying for the meals and not the individuals, you would most likely see a gift in that situation, because aggregated 24 dinners over the course of a year, 24 plus over the course of the year, you are definitely going to exceed $50 and possibly even exceed $500 if it's crab legs and lobster. Maybe not if it's not quite so extravagant. But then this scenario obviously changes if it's just one person who is providing the meals and the firm's not reimbursing them, and so a different person is taking you out every time. And then you have multiple different sources of gifts, so it can be real tricky, and it's something to try to stay conscious of. But it's very difficult a lot of times to keep track of these kinds of things. So you just kind of have to do the best you can to document and stay on top of your gifts, making sure you're reporting them accordingly. And I believe the FPPC actually has an app that you can use to try to sort of contemporaneously keep track of things, so that you can aggregate the information to help you remember, because chances are you're not going to remember everything if you wait until April to fill out your form without making notes. Okay, and so that's the general rule, and it sounds super broad, and it is. And then there are a ton of exceptions to the rule, because what good law doesn't have a lot of exceptions, right? And make it really, really confusing. So a few of the major ones are reciprocal gifts between friends. If you have a pre-existing social relationship that's totally unrelated to your official position, you can, that's fine. You can exchange gifts. Prize winnings, wedding gifts, or similar party favors that you might receive if you attend an event. Publicly offered rebates and discounts. Neighborly gestures, there's a bunch more. Home hospitality, if someone goes to you in their house, it's like a serious laundry list. And it's really hard to remember them all and all the nuances all the time. So again, be safe, issue spot, ask a question. I can be there to give you the answer. Just one exception to the exception is always be aware of anything from someone who is a registered lobbyist. The rules are different if it comes from someone who is a lobbyist. You're pretty much just stay away from it. And consult me if you ever get contacted by a lobbyist who wants to do something, or give you a gift, or invite you to go along somewhere. Another thing to watch out for are indirect gifts that are given to your family member and that you then benefit from. So that can also be considered a gift to you, especially if there's no established relationship between your family member and that person. It could be considered a gift to you. So they really kind of get into the weeds here, making sure they're trying to avoid loopholes and think about every possible situation for sort of backdoor gifts that don't need to be reported. So what are your options when you get a gift that's valued at over $50? You have to decide whether you want to report it on your Form 700 or not. That's essentially the question. If you don't, then you have to give them back the gift or reimburse them for it, or you can give it to a charity. You can't take a tax deduction for that charitable donation. They really have thought of everything. And then obviously if the gift exceeds $500, then you have a duty to either reject it or buy down the value. So a good example here, sort of a hypothetical scenario of over the course of a year, several executives from your local solid waste hauler take you to lunch, and you take turns paying, right? But then they also take you to a Dodger game, and then at the end of the year, they want to pay for you to attend this golf tournament and dinner event, and you really want to go. So what, in that scenario, what do you think the options would be? Correct? That's definitely one option. Anything else, anyone? Yeah, that's the other one too, right? It's like you really, really want to go, but sometimes you just don't go.
You'll be disappointed.
Right, and so you can buy down. So if you kind of tally up these dollar amounts, and assuming that the lunches are really a wash because you've alternated taking turns paying, ultimately you have a gift of $650, and depending on what you're comfortable reporting on your Form 700, you can buy down anywhere from $150 to get you to that $500 threshold to more. And that's within your discretion to determine what your comfort level is in terms of accepting a gift from this company. Yeah? You can if you want.
So you talked about it being a wash. If you're going back and forth between lunches, so you're able to buy, it's a continual buy down along the way?
Yeah. So with lunches, that rule didn't exist for quite some time. And I want to say within the past 5 years, the FPPC changed it so that where you have lunches or rounds of golf or something like that, where you could sort of have a recurring, maybe monthly or a couple times a year, we go out, we go to lunch, we go play golf, and we each take turns paying, so that ultimately it ends up being roughly equal. The amount of money you've spent on this and the amount of money they spent on that, that's the situation where it's not a gift anymore because you have paid roughly the same amount as the value you've received. So it ends up not becoming a gift at all. If there's that exchange back and forth. If they pay every time, it's different. If they take you out for steak and lobster and you take them to McDonald's, it's different. So, but assuming that there's a rough similarity, and the law actually does include the word like approximate in it. I believe the actual word is approximate. It doesn't, you don't have to get down to the dollars and cents, making sure everything is equal. But if you're approximately doing the same amount every time, it ends up being a wash. Okay, so other types of gifts that you don't have to worry about reporting on your Form 700 are gifts to the city itself, and there's a different form that gets filled out for that. And so if there's a gift that's provided to the city that's used for official city business, and the agency head controls it, which in your case would be Brian, there's no gift to you, even though you may benefit from it. It's a gift to the agency and gets reported on a Form 801 and posted to the city's website. So an example of that would be like if a local company wanted to provide some equipment free of charge to the city. I think that might have happened with some services you received actually for your audio video equipment here on the installation. That's not a gift to you individually that you guys have to worry about reporting, even though you all benefit from this wonderful sound system. It's a gift to the agency. Okay, so then there are even more special rules about tickets and passes to ticketed events or other sort of controlled access facilities. They are not considered gifts if you get the ticket or pass because you're there to perform some sort of official function or ceremonial role, like you're giving a speech or something like that. That's not a gift. It's not reportable as a gift. It's might be reportable otherwise, but it's not a gift, right? I'll talk about that a little bit later. It is a gift if it's provided to you directly and then you have no official role in the event. And then it's a gift to the agency and reportable on a different form if it's provided to the agency and not specifically said this is for a particular individual, but the tickets are given to the agency. And then pursuant to your ticket policy, which the city has, those tickets are then distributed out in accordance with the policy. Yes.
I have an example. This is a real life example, so it's coming up. Every year, twice a year, I'll speak at Cal State Fullerton, and the faculty and staff, they'll have a lunchroom. They'll take care of you, and then they'll give you usually a gift for just speaking. Is that have to be reported or not?
Yes,
Okay.
but it's not a gift. It's an honorarium, which is the next topic I'm going to discuss.
It's a speaking again.
Yeah.
event.
So
It's quasi. It has typically when I do the lecture, it has to do with campaigning, and then it has to do with the business as well.
So in that situation, that's called an honorarium, which I'll discuss in a few more slides, but it's actually a permissible honorarium when it's just essentially admission to the event and your sort of incidental benefits that are provided while you're there, like if it's a meal event or other sort of food and beverage.
So, like, we have the dinner coming up for
Exactly.
Norco College coming up,
Mhm.
and we're going there. And if a council member goes, do they need to report that as a gift from the city?
The city purchased the table,
Yeah.
so the city controls those tickets, and as long as you distribute them out pursuant to your policy that you have in place, then it's not reportable on their Form 700s, it's reportable on a Form 802. Yes. I know.
And the city reports it on the 802?
Yes.
Or okay,
And it gets posted to the city's website.
okay.
So, I know, I'm like 15 minutes in and your heads are already spinning, right? So, it's a lot to get through in 2 hours, and I know I'm moving at lightning speed, but I'm always available for questions. Okay, so an example of tickets gone awry. I've got a nice little entertaining video, Cliff, if you don't mind, Stephanie.
Well, tonight's an NBC Bay Area investigative unit exclusive. It's the perks of power.
In San Francisco, the mayor, supervisors, and some well-placed commission members all get free season tickets to Candlestick Park to watch the 49ers. So the question tonight is that good city business or is it bad city ethics?
NBC Bay Area's chief investigator, Tony Kovaleski, joins us now. And Tony, plenty of people on different sides of the fence here, but one thing we know for sure, your questions are rattling some feathers, so to speak.
I think that's very fair to say. Uncomfortable, and some just flat out don't want to talk about it. Here's why. Mayor Lee has already asked the city's attorney to take a closer look. Two supervisors have said they could support ending the city's free ticket program. While many are talking about this investigation, one city department wants nothing to do with the questions from the investigative unit. In San Francisco, a win at the ballot box brings power, prestige, and season tickets to the 49ers. Privileges like parking passes and playoff tickets. The mayor controls 12 tickets per game to his luxury box. The city's 11 supervisors all get 2 tickets per game. A fringe benefit Supervisor Avalos and 6 other supervisors accepted this past season. And across town, nobody attended more games than members of the city's Rec and Park Commission. Commission President Mark Buell. Should this practice continue?
Well, sadly, I don't think it's going to continue because they're going to move to Santa Clara. But historically in San Francisco, commissions that oversee property or operations have some association with it.
Does something that's unethical 2 decades ago become less unethical now?
No, if something is wrong, it doesn't make it right by the fact that you've been doing it for a long time.
San Francisco-based lawyer and ethicist Peter Keene has criticized city supervisors and now the city's Rec and Parks Commission for accepting the free tickets. They're attending every game free with a family member. A problem?
A big problem. People want clean government.
Who's got it better than us? No! And during this past season, nobody had it better than 2 members of the Rec and Parks Commission.
They serve at, I think, $97 a month, and they put in a lot more time and effort than that.
So that justifies getting perks like free tickets to the 49er games?
When the 49ers are doing better, it's a bigger perk.
Clearly a perk for Commissioner Gloria Bonilla. Public records show she used her 2 luxury box tickets to attend 9 games, 18 tickets valued at nearly $4,000. And a perk for Commissioner Larry Martin. Records show he didn't miss a game. For the season, 10 games, 26 box tickets, valued at more than $5,000. So how do Supervisors Bonilla and Martin explain their decision to turn free tickets into season tickets? Well, we don't know. They declined our request for an on-camera interview, and they're not the only ones not talking about the city's free ticket program.
Tony Kovaleski with NBC Bay Area. Is Mr. Ginsburg available?
After several calls and emails were not returned, we visited the office of Rec and Park GM Phil Ginsburg. Later that day, on a second visit, his staff agreed to an interview.
Yeah, we'll be here noon. Thank you. We'll see you then. Scheduled for noon. Yep. See you tomorrow. Yeah, my cell phone number.
GM Ginsburg runs the city's Rec and Parks department. He controls his own luxury box, hands out the tickets, and his department manages all the public accountability for the free tickets. Now remember that scheduled interview, a chance for GM Ginsburg to explain his free ticket program? Well, an hour before the meeting, Ginsburg's team shut down the interview. A free ticket program with state-mandated accountability to California taxpayers. A program run by a general manager and directed by 2 commissioners who, by all indication, want nothing to do with public accountability.
And the citizens of San Francisco looking at this will say, this is not proper.
So season tickets at the Rec and Parks Commission. We found one supervisor handing tickets out to his mother-in-law, others using their position to purchase hard-to-get NFC championship tickets. At City Hall, pressure building as Mayor Ed Lee told us he wants San Francisco City Attorney to review the entire program. Bottom line, we're asking the question, just because it's politics as usual, should that continue? More to come.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tony.
Mayor Lee, interesting comments from him. Thank you, Tony.
Okay. So I love that video because it's a good intro into like why these rules, compliance sometimes can seem just difficult and overly nitpicking, and then nobody wants to be that person on that video, right? No one wants the investigative unit coming after you. Even if you're doing something that a practice that's been in place for a long time and no one has ever questioned before, doesn't necessarily mean it's right. I also like that video because somebody needed to talk to that Park and Rec Board president about some media training and what not to say when you're on camera with the press. But yeah, I know, right? I always wonder how much longer he kept his position after that interview was aired. So a few, just wrapping up on gifts, a few things to remember is that consequences of violating the gift rules can disqualify you from making decisions that may relate to the source of the gift. There's also administrative, criminal, and civil sanction possibilities through enforcement actions by either FPPC or the state attorney general or district attorney's office. And then just one more reminder of, not wanting to become a headline. Not that long ago, former Mayor Villaraigosa of Los Angeles got hit with the largest ethics fine ever for accepting free tickets to lots of different events, the Oscars and other award ceremonies, Laker games, and whatnot. It was a $42,000 fine when it was all said and done, multiple violations, and they found that very few of the tickets actually related to events where he performed any sort of ceremonial role or function, which allows him to accept the tickets without having to actually claim them. Most of them, he just was sitting courtside having a lot of fun. So, okay. Moving on from gifts to honoraria, which are very similar to gifts, but just slightly different and don't come up quite as often. And they're sort of treated as a cross between gifts and income. So an honoraria is when you receive something in exchange for your attendance at an event, or you give a speech or something along those lines. And so they're typically not allowed. However, there are lots of exceptions. You can turn it over to your agency. If it's done in relation to your bona fide profession, that's also not a violation of the rules. It can be done in that context. If it's a nominal trophy or plaque worth about $250 or less. It also, free admission to the event and your meals and lodging is not considered an honorarium, or it is, but it's an accept one, so you don't have to worry about it. And then if you do the charitable donation, again, option just like with the gift, but you don't claim it as a tax deduction. then you're safe as well. And this one has another additional nuance, is that it can't be a bequested charitable donation. In other words, the group that has invited you to speak, say as an example, they can't say, oh, we're making a charitable donation at your direction in lieu of paying you. So it has to be on their own volition. So there's another example here of someone being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award at a black tie gala fundraiser for a nonprofit. You receive a plaque and make an acceptance speech, and then they announce that a scholarship fund is being created in your name. So great life you've obviously lived. Is there an honorarium there? And I think the answer to that is, one, you need a little bit more information on the scholarship piece, at least. We don't know necessarily that person's involvement in the scholarship fund and how it's going to be structured. But the free admission and meals, there's an exception that covers that. The plaque, there's an exception that covers that. And then also, we also don't know if this is actually related to their public service or to their profession. And if it's related to their profession, it would obviously be exempt as well. Okay, so next sort of category of gifts that we need to cover. This one is like very obscure, but there is a constitutional provision that prohibits elected and appointed officials from accepting free or discounted travel from transportation companies. And the consequence for doing that is you get forfeit your office. That's pretty extreme. There are 0 cases on this particular constitutional provision, and it stems from the days when the railroads were super powerful and were exerting a lot of power over elected officials. However, just note, it only applies to free and discounted travel from transportation companies, which are the for-profit businesses that are regulated by the CPUC. It doesn't apply to any free travel you might get from a governmental operated transportation agency like RTA or Metrolink or anything like that. Okay, so mass mailings are another one that's kind of, it used to be a lot more relevant, and email and social media use by public agencies to push out their messages have made it a lot less relevant, I guess. So these rules pertain to when the agency sends out a mass mailing and it physically has to be mailed of 200 items or more that are substantially similar in feature an elected or appointed official with the agency. I'll kind of skim through this a little bit because I don't think I've ever seen you guys do a mass mailing. You do everything electronically and through your social media platforms. However, some cities still do, like especially if they have Parks and Rec service, they have send out like a booklet of all of the class offerings and whatnot, and something like that would be covered by this rule. And the rule is that the mass mailing can't feature the elected officer with their photograph or signature or anything that sort of singles them out and features them in any way. And the kind of logic behind that is it's almost like a campaign material where it's like promoting your activities in the community, and the agency is spending money on something that's campaign-ish. So that's why it's not allowed. There's a lot of exceptions to the rule, but agencies are still getting, dinged for non-compliance. So if Eastville ever decides to wind back the clock and go back to paper, which I don't see happening anytime soon, I can assist you on compliance with this, but otherwise I really don't see it being an issue here in Eastville. Sort of the next major category that we're going to talk about in the gifts is gifts of public funds and then misuse of public funds. So an expenditure of public funds has to be for a public purpose, right? Everyone knows this. And so the test that the courts apply is there a public purpose? And then does it advance the agency's public purpose? So for a city or another agency that has sort of a broad scope, general purpose sort of agency, it's pretty easy to meet this test and justify the expenditure of public funds. Where you see these rules being more difficult is when you have a limited purpose agency, like say a school district or a water district. Like a school district can't just like give money to a water district and say, oh, hey, here you go. That doesn't, unless it has some sort of furtherance of the school district's purposes. So what is a gift of public funds? It includes really any sort of financial aid, including lending of the agency's credit, even if you don't actually give them any money, if you use the agency's credit or any other thing of value that's provided to the person. But as long as you have a reasonable basis for finding that there's a public purpose supporting that expenditure or use of public financial resources, then it's permissible. And it's totally okay if there's an incidental private benefit that stems from that flow of money. And this before and after picture I show is sort of the example that was most in my mind, that sort of popped to my mind. During the drought, these turf removal and replacement programs were really common and super popular. And do people benefit from getting money from the government to replace their lawn? Absolutely. But there's a public purpose behind that also, which is water conservation. So those kinds of programs are totally allowed. Misuse of public resources. Don't drop kick your fax machine in the middle of the field. So this one's sort of self-explanatory, but maybe more nuanced. A more nuanced use of public resources is, things like making copies on the copy machine, using city phones to make personal phone calls, or other unauthorized things. I love that movie. So then, as this rule is sort of applied, you have to have a personal or unauthorized purpose. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And then public resources is also very broad, right? And so it includes the use of public land and facilities, other physical equipment you have here, and employee time. So example of a misuse that got some headlines a few years back, there was a fire captain in San Bernardino County who used a county truck and on-duty firewomen to help one of their coworkers move from his home to a new home, and just on the taxpayer's dime. So that's sort of an obvious example of a misuse of public resources. Now, no one is going to lay down the law or the hammer on a de minimis sort of use. Like if you take a Post-it note, or maybe you have a "how's your family? We're passing in the hallway" conversation. That's acceptable and normal. I'm not trying to take all the joy out of City Hall and make it a totally impersonal place, but know that there's a line out there somewhere, and you never really want to get close to the line. So stay south of the line, and you'll be fine. Make sure you're being conscious of how the taxpayers' resources are being used. Another video on misuse of public resources to sort of highlight why you don't want to push the line, I guess.
Yeah, Tony Adrian, according to the state auditor, employees investigated for misconduct last year cost taxpayers like you and I close to $200,000. The Sacramento community fired up over a lengthy 60-page state audit exposing several state agencies for abusing the system. One of the most egregious happening at the DMV with a key data operator. The investigation revealed the employee slept on the job for at least 3 hours a day from 2014 until 2017, costing the state more than $40,000.
I think they should go through and revamp the whole system.
Another investigation by the state auditor found an assistant chief for CAL FIRE in Santa Clara used 2 employees to build a tiki room in 2016 while they were on duty. The assistant chief then used that building to host personal parties.
Was there a danger there? Absolutely. Not saying that they didn't know what the construction should be like, but 1, it was unauthorized, 2, it was not inspected.
And the audit reveals worse. 2 maintenance workers at Cal State Fresno found lying about working full shifts, which cost state taxpayers more than $111,000 over a period of 4 years. But the findings in the audit aren't the least bit surprising for this couple.
We know quite a few people who work for the state.
But on Saturdays, they would take turns and with a punch card. And she would go in, or somebody was assigned to punch people in so they could get overtime, and nobody showed up.
Watchdog group Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association says the state needs a more rigorous system to bust problem employees.
Yeah, sorry, I had that one cropped, and I'm not that good at technology, so I had a little glitch there at the end. But just a brief example of, again, people are paying attention. And some of those examples were really egregious, but you know, some of them are also a little bit smaller in that report. And trust me, a lot of small violations are just as egregious in the public's mind as one large violation. So just keep that in mind. The next topic, abuse of office. I just want to highlight this for you. This particular statute was adopted as a direct result of the Bell scandal. And what it provides is that if you're convicted of a violation of the law that is considered to be abuse of your authority or a crime against public justice, which is super vague and broad, that conviction will result in negative financial consequences for you, especially if the agency had provided you a defense. You have to reimburse those defense costs. If in the context of an employee, if you received a termination payout, you would have to reimburse that, and you could possibly lose your retirement benefits as well. So pretty severe consequences that were adopted as a direct result of the Bell scandal, because if you remember, Robert Rizzo was making $700,000 a year, something like that, and that's a pretty hefty CalPERS retirement. Okay, expense reimbursement is the last slide in our topic on perks of office. One thing to remember on expense reimbursements is that you have to timely submit them, and then you have to make an oral report at your next meeting, or next regular meeting, excuse me, of any Brown Act meetings that you attended at the agency's expense. And so that's part of the reason why we have council reports, and you go through all the different agencies that you have attended meetings for, so you guys are good there, and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we've gotten through the first major topic. Next topic is governmental transparency. This one's going to go a little bit faster because I focus a lot on perks and then on conflicts of interest. So Political Reform Act, since we were just talking about it, just a reminder, the purpose of the Form 700 is transparency. It's to avoid conflicts of interest for yourself, so you know what your financial interests are, and also so that the public can hold you accountable in your decision making. So just remember that is the real purpose of those Form 700s, and that you have to disclose your income, if it's $500 or more from any particular source, investments, interests in real property, business positions, and your gifts, as we just discussed. And so former CalPERS board member Priya Mather was an example of someone who was problematic with her Form 700s and was fined $4,000. She filed her Form 700 8 months late and was documented as deliberately evading attempts to contact her regarding filing of her Form 700. So I'm in Stephanie's corner when she says, did you file your Form 700? I've got her back there. Make sure you file it on time, because the FPPC does have fining authority there. So the bulk of this transparency section talks about the Brown Act. So the Brown Act itself, it's such an extensive topic. You could do a whole 2-hour training. I'm not doing that tonight. If you ever want a separate Brown Act training, I'm more than happy to provide it. But yeah, I'll give you all a break. So we want to sort of preface this part of the presentation with a quote that comes right from the findings and purpose statement in the Brown Act, which is that the people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments that they have created. So that is in the law. And I think it's a good reminder where sometimes people think of the Brown Act as limitations, and it is in a certain way, but it reminds you that you've been delegated power, right? The power is in the people, and you have been delegated that power by them, and they're actually retaining some of that power with the Brown Act in making sure that they're still involved and everything is open and available to them. Well, not everything, but most everything. So as you all know, a meeting is whenever a majority of the members of the body gather to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on matters within your subject matter jurisdiction. That's some of the that's like Brown Act 101 right there. So the question is well, when the heck can we even talk to each other, right? It does always have to be at a noticed public meeting like we have here this evening. no, there are exceptions. And the biggest one that I want to focus on tonight is the individual contacts and conversations, which can occur in person, via email or text, whatever you have. So this one is frequently relied upon, and I want to make sure everyone really has a clear understanding of its limitations and what it actually allows. So kind of run through this hypothetical and then explain it a little bit as with the following slides. So if a complicated item, for example, is coming up on a city council agenda, and then a few days beforehand or several weeks beforehand, the city manager meets individually with all 5 of the council members to provide information about that item, answer any questions that you might have. Is that okay? Yes, it is okay. And so this graphic kind of shows you can do, 5 individual meetings, you can do 2 by 2 by 1s, you can do 2 by 1 by 1, whatever it has, so long as no more than a quorum or majority of you, and you're a 5-member body, so that limit is 2, are involved at the same time, then that is totally acceptable and is actually a really efficient way to kind of keep the ball rolling without having to do an agendized meeting to get direction and sort of initial feedback on subjects. So it's not a violation. And why is it not a violation? Because the city manager and city staff members and myself are not a member of the legislative body. You have to remember that the meeting is a gathering of a majority of you all, and that we are not actually subject to that limitation. And so in that example, it is permissible. However, you need to remember that it would be a different scenario if one of you was the one facilitating the meeting and not the city manager or someone on city staff. So employees and officials are allowed by the Brown Act expressly to engage in separate conversations and communications with the legislative body, so long as you're not actively facilitating essentially the sharing of information amongst you all. So if the city manager hears from you, keeps that information, doesn't tell you what other members of the council are saying, that is totally acceptable. But now in this scenario, where you get a council member who is initiating the discussion, and Councilmember A then talks to B about a specific matter, that's also okay. That's still an individual contact. That is only 2 of you. However, if the A then goes and talks to C about the same thing, is that okay? No, it's not. Right, so you have to remember here that even if Councilmember A doesn't share between B and C what the 2 have said at all, there's still 3 members of the body who have been involved in that conversation. So A has been in contact with the majority. So that's just something I want to make sure that we have abundantly clear here this evening. I think it's something that members of the public don't always grasp, that exception and how it works. And then also, it's something that is commonly used and is totally acceptable. So I want to make sure, as long as you're operating within the parameters of what the Brown Act allows. So something that I like to focus on these trainings, because I think it's the one that generates a lot of questions, and it's one of the more commonly used exceptions to the Brown Act meeting rule. So the takeaway, again, is that staff can do it, council members can't. So when can you talk to each other besides those individual contacts? There's several other exceptions that allow you to attend conferences together, that allow you to attend open and publicized meetings of another Brown Act body together, that allow you to attend social and ceremonial occasions together. And so those exceptions also apply. However, you always have to be cognizant of the fact that you're not allowed to discuss very specific business of the agency when you are at those events. You can talk about things that come up at the conference, things that come up at the occasion. That's all fine, but specific business of the agency you can't discuss and still be within the sort of the safe harbor of those exceptions.
Can they all go to the same wedding and sit at the same table?
Sure, why not? That's a social ceremonial occasion.
Just making sure.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think Brian has an announcement later. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Okay. So couple other things I want to mention again about the Brown Act before we move on to a different topic, is discussion of items not on the agenda. It's prohibited in general. However, you are allowed to briefly respond to public statements and public comment and ask for clarification, make brief announcements, brief report on your activities, ask staff to get you some information, or direct that something come back at a later meeting. Actually, just today, there was a new published Brown Act case that deals with these exceptions. And the case is actually kind of decided on a technical legal issue and doesn't get into the substance of this, but is an example of the fact that people were out there watching and were actually challenging, in this case it was the city of Novato, on how brief is brief. And they were challenging, is 12 minutes of conversation on that particular issue brief or not? And so the court doesn't reach that issue, but people questioned it in that community. So brief is good, in my view. And just remember that on the Brown Act, there are criminal, civil sanction possibilities. However, a person who is alleged a Brown Act violation almost always has to first ask the agency to cure and correct the violation, and they can't sue you unless you just refuse to do it, or refuse to cease and desist to something that they're claiming is an ongoing problem. Okay, so another example, another headline from the city of Los Angeles this time regarding their agendas and sort of cryptic agenda descriptions and allegations that no one could really understand what was even on the agenda and what was being discussed. So, all right. Moving on to my sorry planners, don't mean to put you on blast with all of your with all your acronyms and numbers and file numbers and all that stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna take a sip of water for just a second. Excuse me. Well, most likely, if the planning director can't understand the planning speak, we got some real problems. So, next subject under transparency is the Public Records Act. So, under the Public Records Act, any records that pertain to the people's business that are in the city's actual or constructive possession are subject to disclosure unless there's a specific exemption that applies. And so, constructive possession means that even if you don't physically have it, if you have ownership or control over it, that you may be required to disclose it. A good example of that would be like contracts that are prepared pursuant to a contract with a consultant, where the consultant may have the record, but you actually own it pursuant to the terms of your contract. So what is a public record? It's pretty much anything under the sun as long as it pertains to the public's business. It's not just documents and emails. Voicemails. If you have tapes back in your county archives, which you inherited when you incorporated, those would be public records as well. There's open questions right now regarding metadata and things that are in online documents. If you have to scrub all of that metadata out, or if that's part of what is a public record subject to disclosure. So it's really broad. But unless it doesn't pertain to the public business at all, it is still a public record. However, I always like to give a note of caution there that, if you are talking about anything of a personal nature at all in emails, especially, or text messages, even though it's not a public record and wouldn't have to be disclosed in response to a request, it doesn't mean someone else is not going to see it, because a lot of times those emails get captured when we have to do keyword searches or other things, and someone has to go through all of those to weed out the ones that are being asked for from the ones that aren't. So just a note there. And also sort of anecdotally, maybe 6 years ago, there was a board reporter down in San Diego County who put out public records requests to a bunch of cities down there asking for any and all emails that used a laundry list of curse words, the words idiot, moron, things like that, because it was fishing for emails where officials and employees had used bad language regarding others, trying to create a headline. So, think about things like that. Things that I would just like, who does that? Who does that? Someone does it. So remind yourself of that when you're writing something in an email or in a text message. Okay, so we've pretty much already gone over this, except that just another reminder, as you all are aware, due to the San Jose case that came out about a year and a half ago or so, even emails and texts on your private devices, private accounts are public records if they pertain to the public's business. And so every agency is going to have different sort of implementing procedures on how they get those emails or other records from you. I don't think we've, knock on wood, had to deal with that yet here in Eastvale, but just remember that really your role is to help facilitate compliance. So to the extent that you're asked to search your private accounts when we get a request of that nature, your compliance and cooperation is greatly appreciated. So a few examples of exemptions or exceptions from disclosure are listed on this slide. There are a lot more. You don't really have to worry about these too much because normally I'm the person who goes through stuff and then determines when exemptions apply. So that's just a few examples there. Also remember that most of them are discretionary and can be waived. So even if something is exempt, it doesn't mean that you have to withhold it. You can always choose to provide it unless it's something where there's a privacy interest involved, like someone's social security number. You can't just go release your employee's social security numbers or anything like that. So a look harder. The message is like, I always like to tell people when I get responses back, oh, I got nothing. I'm like, do you really have nothing? Like, where did you look? Can you explain to me what your search is? And it's not always because, they don't want to provide something or they're being evasive, but it's mostly because sometimes they just don't think, oh, how do I go about finding these things that people have asked for? So reach out to me or to the clerk's office and we can always help you figure out how to do an adequate search. Because an inadequate search is actually a violation of the act in and of itself, and National City got hit with a pretty big attorney's fee award a few years ago for failure to conduct an adequate search in response to a public records request. So we have 10 days to provide the initial response and assert any exemptions. We can exert an extension of time for up to 14 days in unusual circumstances. And then that's just to provide the initial response. The records have to be provided promptly thereafter, which is always, subject to interpretation. But the timelines are really tight. So, these are actually very important and need to be prioritized when they come in, especially when they are for a lot of records, because it can take quite a bit of time to go through everything and make sure we've had enough time to review things before we have determined what exemptions apply and what we need to provide. So an example, I'm going to skip this one because I wrote this one for that example for the conference, and it's geared towards a city that's open on Fridays and not closed over the holidays, which does not apply to you guys. So I'll just skip that example and move on to the next major topic. So we've gotten halfway through the major topics that we need to discuss, and I think I'm at about almost exactly the halfway point. So I think I'm like 7 minutes shy of the halfway point. So I might actually get you out of here a few minutes early if I'm lucky. Yeah, thank you, Joe. I'll take it. I know this is rough. So we'll move on to the conflicts of interest topic. Contractual conflicts or Government Code Section 1090 conflicts are the first set of conflicts I like to discuss because they have the most severe consequences. So these are contractual conflicts of interest, and it provides that public officials, both elected and appointed on a legislative body and city staff members, and sometimes even consultants, are prohibited from making contracts or participating in making contracts if you have a financial interest in them. So it's sort of the age-old contractual self-dealing that's been, illegal for quite some time and was eventually codified in the government code in section 1090, but it was illegal long before that was even done. So it applies to all public officials. with any financial interest in the contract, even if it's just 1 penny, right? So this is part of the reason why this one is so severe. There's no sort of de minimis threshold that you need to get over. Any financial interest in the contract at all is triggering for a Section 1090 violation. And for members of a legislative body, what ends up happening is if one of you has a 1090 conflict, then the entire board is prevented from making or entering into the contract. Recusal doesn't resolve a Section 1090 conflict of interest. There are lots of exceptions to this rule, though. One of which I note here is that there could be a rule of necessity exception if if their financial interest is remote or considered a non-interest under the law. So this just reflects the concept that you can't serve 2 masters simultaneously. You can't serve the city and the taxpayer and then also your personal financial interests at the same time. So a couple examples there of, sort of obvious 1090 issues where the city is making a purchase for either goods or services directly from a council member. And then this one is actually a real life example where a county supervisor sold his printing business to his son and in return got a loan secured by the business. And then county printing contracts were awarded to that son's business. And that was deemed to violate Section 1090 because the awarding of those contracts enhanced the value of the security, the county supervisor's security in the business. And so that was a contractual conflict under Section 1090 as well. So it's not always so obvious. So to avoid Section 1090 conflicts is just be vigilant about what financial interests could potentially come up, and then consult with me as early as possible, especially in noting that recognizing that recusal will not resolve the situation if there's no remote or non-interest exemption. So if that's the case, then the city needs to step back and rethink how it's going to go about obtaining whatever good or service it needs but can't get through this particular contract. So as I mentioned, the consequences are severe. The contract is considered void and unenforceable from day one. So then what ends up happening is you have to return any financial benefit you've received, but the agency gets to keep all of the benefits it received. It also could be a felony if it's a willful violation that lands you in prison. And you're also barred for life from serving in public office in California. Is that a clap for that? There we go. I don't ever get claps in ethics training. I didn't realize I wasn't trying to pander to the audience, trust me.
Was that bribery?
Okay. So moving on from Section 1090, now we're going to go to the Political Reform Act conflict of interest rules. So we already talked about the Political Reform Act with gifts, Form 700 disclosures. Now we're back to it on conflicts of interest. And so this Political Reform Act, what it provides is that you, again, can't participate in making or attempt to influence any governmental decision if you have a financial interest in that decision. So, right, seems pretty straightforward, right? Like I can just move on after this one slide. But no, the FPPC has adopted some of the most complex rules, I think, in any area of law that I practice with respect to determining when you actually have a material conflict of interest that prohibits you from participating in the decision. So again, remember, be safe, spot the issue, ask for help. So this is the summary of the FPPC's analysis that they run through. It used to be an 8-step analysis. They narrowed it down to 4, though I think it's just as complex. All they did was combine some things into one number. Didn't really do much in terms of actually streamlining the analysis. So what are your financial interests that you need to be aware of? Businesses, if you have an investment in it of $2,000 or more, or a business position with that business, your real property investments. Of note, month-to-month leases are not covered under here. Term leases where you have more than a month on your term, and then obviously any real property you own are covered. Sources of income, sources of gifts, and your personal finances, which are just sort of the catch-all category that captures anything else that may not be in the top four. If the decision will have a reasonably foreseeable effect on any one of those financial interests, then you have a conflict. And so what is reasonably foreseeable? Well, if it's either expressly involved, which is sort of obvious, right? Or if it's not expressly involved in the decision, if there's a realistic possibility that is more than hypothetical or theoretical. That is the best the FPPC could do in giving clarification as to what it thinks is reasonably foreseeable. It's incredibly vague. So most analyses just sort of assume it's probably going to be reasonably foreseeable. Let's move on to the next steps where we have some more concrete guidelines that we can follow. So with that being said, the concrete guidelines I just referred to are the materiality standards, and they're super complex. So I'm not even going to really try to go over them this evening. Just know that if you're getting to that point where you're having to look at whether your interest is material or not, then you probably need to be talking to me anyways. However, again, as sort of a rule of thumb, if your economic interest is expressly involved in the decision, then you're going to presume that it's materially impacted as well. So for example, if your employer is coming before this body asking for a contract or asking for a permit of some sort, that's going to be expressly involved financial interest that causes you to recuse yourself. And then when are you participating in making or attempting to influence a decision? Pretty straightforward. However, the attempting to influence one is something that I think gets overlooked sometimes. When you have a conflict of interest, it's about more than just stepping down from the dais. It means you really should have no involvement at all. So any communications with staff about the particular issue that may come up, all of it is prohibited, and you should just really extract yourself from the matter entirely. So yes, I think that's pretty much it when it comes to the financial conflicts of interest, except as I mentioned, if it does involve a decision that comes before the council at a meeting, you do have to follow certain procedures that you publicly identify the interest and step down from the decision-making process, step down from the dais, explaining why, leave the room, and then when the matter is done, you can come back. There are some exceptions where you can stay in the room in the audience and comment if it's the matter, the conflict of interest relates to like your personal residence, a business that's wholly owned by you, and there's one other one that allows you to actually stay in the room, but for the most part, you have to leave. And then another example of this time a Santa Barbara County, a supervisor who was in the headlines because she voted on a contract to award a contract to a company where her husband was the attorney for that company and was directly benefiting from that contract. Okay, this is the last topic. Fair process. Of those 4 topics at the beginning, this is the very last one. So, common law bias. Even if you don't have a financial conflict of interest under the Political Reform Act or Section 1090 or anything else, there's still this body of law that we call the common law that's all created by judges in cases that set additional rules that need to be followed. And that's what we're referring to when we mention the common law. So what it requires, and it seems that you all would be very well aware of this, is that you have to be fair, right? Everyone knows that. You have to be unbiased and impartial and objective when you're making a decision. And you shouldn't participate in decisions that impact your personal interests if they're in conflict with the public's interest. And that's more than just financial. So an example of a common law conflict of interest that was found to exist comes from a case, actually, I think it's coming up in a couple slides, so I'll just jump to it. City of Hermosa Beach, where he was a month-to-month renter in an apartment, and he lived in an apartment, so he had no real property interest in it because he was a month-to-month renter. And then there was a development project that came that was going to block the views from his apartment. And they were like, he participated in the decision. He obviously wanted to participate in this decision because he didn't want his views to be impacted. But in that particular instance, the court found that his personal interest in protecting the views from his private residence prevented him from being able to be being fair and unbiased, excuse me. So there was a common law conflict there. So going back a couple more slides again, it's just a quote from the case law. A public officer is bound to exercise the powers that are conferred on him or her with disinterested skill, zeal, and diligence, and for the benefit of the public. So again, as the example showed, both personal and financial interests are covered by that. The remedy is that you are required to step down from participating or voting in that matter, and the consequences are somewhat vague, and the judge has a lot of leeway to determine what is an appropriate consequence depending on the specifics of the situation. But we have seen in cases that have come down, so a complete unwinding of transactions, disgorgement of profits that require the conflicted official to return everything that they received, and then additional damages, as well as possibly an award of attorney's fees against you. Okay. Bribery, Brian. You just accused me of taking a bribe, so I'll go over what a bribe actually is. I'll go over what a bribe actually is right now. Yeah, it didn't work, no. And so bribery, as you all are aware, is the prohibition against an officer or employee taking something of value on an agreement or understanding that they'll take a particular action in a certain way in their official capacity. So it's pretty straightforward. I think you all know what bribes are. Obviously, it is a criminal violation that includes prison if you are convicted, and then again, also a permanent loss of office. Okay. Another ethical topic to discuss is the revolving door rule. This is codified in your code, actually, and then your municipal code, and it's also in state law, and it's also in the FPPC rules, so you've got your bases covered. But the general rule is that after you leave this dais and you're no longer on the city council, you cannot come before the city council and actively appear on someone else's behalf for money. Essentially, what it requires is that there be sort of a cooling off period between when you leave your official position and then when you come back and are pleading for your former colleagues to take a certain action one way or the other. But it only applies if you're being compensated and you're appearing for someone else for that appearance. If you're appearing on your own behalf for your own personal reasons, that's totally fine. You just can't, make money off of doing it for someone else for a year. So an example here is 6 months after a council member is not reelected, she is then hired by a local developer to appear before the city council at a public hearing on the project. And then that would obviously be a violation of the revolving door rule. And this hypothetical is actually, it's not uncommon, where you see developers or others that appear frequently before elected and appointed bodies like to utilize elected officials or former elected officials because of their knowledge of how things work, and it makes sense, and it's sort of like you have good job experience to qualify you for that position. But to ensure that there's enough separation, we have that 1 year cooling off period. Okay, we're heading into the home stretch, I promise, and we're definitely going to be done early, so yay. Future employment. This is sort of incumbent on you to be aware of, but you're prohibited from participating in decisions regarding your prospective employers. So you would only know who your prospective employers are. So, be advised that if you are on the job hunt and then someone you're applying to, you're trying to get a job from is actively appearing before you, then, you have to recuse yourself from that decision. Which is kind of like playing your cards, but it is what it is. Incompatible offices. Also, you just need to kind of keep this in the back of your mind if you're ever looking at holding two public offices simultaneously. If there's an overlap in those offices and their responsibilities, then you can't hold them both at the same time. And if you do take up that second office, you are deemed to have immediately forfeited your prior office. So a good example there would be like you can't be on the county board of supervisors and the city council at the same time, right? No, I think that's pretty obvious. But there have been, situations come up where people have questioned if you could say be on the school board and the city council at the same time, or on some other commission at the same time. And so you can get a formal opinion on that from the Attorney General or the FPPC if you're seriously considering it. And I would advise that you do that before you embark on taking or at least seeking the second public office. Okay. The next fair process topic is competitive bidding. Yes, we are required to talk about competitive bidding in ethics training. So the Public Contracts Code governs competitive bidding on public works project. There's two different bodies of law, and depending on which one the agency opts into, those are the sets of rules you have to follow. For all other purchases and things that aren't public works projects, the agency is required by law to have a set of rules. You guys have those rules in place that apply to purchases for supplies, equipment, and professional and non-professional services. So we follow those. The purpose behind these rules is to make sure that there is a fair process and there's no nepotism or favoritism of any kind, to make sure that the taxpayer is getting the good use of their tax dollars and that the city is getting the best sort of bang for its buck, excuse me. However, the downfall sometimes can be you get what you pay for, especially on competitive bids where you are required by law to award to the lowest responsive bidder. Sometimes there are companies out there that try to game the system in low bid, and you end up having to spend more money in the long run to fix their work, unfortunately. But sort of a downfall, but these are the rules that still have to be followed in the game that has to be played. So my advice is always, don't interfere with staff's process. Certainly question if a contract's coming to you, make sure that the process was followed, but the process is pretty clear and laid out. And so I have seen situations come up where, in other agencies, where council members have, said, well, I really like this other company better. Like, well, the process is the process, and through this process, that other company didn't meet the qualifications or didn't get submitted on time, or some other reason that disqualifies them from actually getting the contract. And to protect the agency, you really have to protect the integrity of that process. So example here of a consequence is that under the Public Contracts Code, you could be liable to reimburse a low bidder their costs in preparing their bid if you don't actually end up awarding the contract to them. And so there was a pretty big scandal related to fair process and procurement a few years ago regarding the LA Unified School District and the procurement of $1 billion worth of iPads. Some of you may remember this, but ultimately there was no criminal allegations really brought against anyone, but this is a great example of perception really being reality. So even though investigation was done and no charges were ever brought, there was definitely the perception that the former superintendent of the LA Unified School District had rigged the bidding process in Apple's favor for these $1 billion worth of iPads. And in response to public records requests, there had been communications exposed where, former Superintendent Deasy had, met with Tim Cook of Apple, and lots of communications back and forth regarding what Apple could do for the district in terms of iPads, and then some supporting software that then really looked like it indirectly informed the documents that went out when they were soliciting bids for tablets. And lo and behold, who ends up winning it? Apple, for their iPad product. And so it was a big scandal. The superintendent DZ tried to backtrack from it and start the whole process over again, and that did end up happening. But the damage was more than done at that point, and about 2 months later, he ended up resigning, and who knows what he's up to now. So, just he might be. Who knows? I'll have to look that one up. But not only did he resign, he was the superintendent of a very, very large school district, maybe the largest in the country, and he resigned with like almost no severance either. I mean, he really had to walk away. There was nothing there for him anymore. So, okay, so with that, I've actually covered all of the required topics to be covered in the AB 1234 ethics training. So we're super in the home stretch right now. So a couple things I just want to impress upon you and remind you of is that everything I just went over was technical legal compliance. It's the bare minimum, and ethics is about so much more than that. You need to determine what's the right thing to do, and so. Does that mean you need to follow the law? Yes, absolutely, always. That's the bare minimum. However, you should always be looking at what your community expects of you and how far they expect you to go above and beyond, and what your own internal sort of moral compass is telling you you should be doing in terms of where your sort of line is above and beyond what the law actually requires of you. So you need to kind of do what I call an ethical gut check. So again, the first question is always going to be, is it legal? But then the second is, is it consistent with my values? And then the third is how will it look in the newspaper? How will it look to the public? So I have a final video that it gives an example of different ethical
There it is. Let's clear the air. Last night, I opened up this gift basket for my own pleasure.
Really? Leslie Knope, usually such a pretty stickler for the rules.
I'm not happy about it either, Tom.
It's like I don't even know you anymore.
Last year, you wrote me up for making personal phone calls to my mom.
Yes, I did, and I would do it again. 2 wrongs do not make a right.
Yes, but she was in the hospital.
I did not know that at the time.
So can I have the basket?
No, I'm sorry, it's evidence.
It's a nice basket.
What would you put in there?
I don't know, potpourri. It's a lot of potpourri. Hey, I am not the one on trial here.
I appreciate and thank you in advance for your unwavering support.
I think you should go to jail. Think about what you've done.
Go to jail? What's going on?
Ron, I have a very important and very long story to tell you.
Put it in an email?
Nope. It happened right out there. Right outside this window. Why can't I look away?
Let's not blow this out of proportion.
I will blow this in proportion. The minimum punishment for this is an official reprimand from the city manager.
It's not that big a deal.
Maybe in your world it isn't a big deal. You're a white Protestant man with a full, rich mustache. But I am a woman, and I need to hold myself up to a higher standard.
This is ridiculous. You're punishing yourself more than anybody else is going to.
So, punishing yourself more than anyone else is going to punish you. And so I love ending with that clip because it's a great example of a situation where the legal standard, at least in Pawnee, Indiana, was probably pretty low, right? I mean, it was a gift basket. Who knows if it was even provided to her? I mean, in California, that'd probably be a gift to the agency, right? But it clearly was not up to par for Leslie Knope and her standards, though others may agree to disagree on that. And so sort of the parting words here on this presentation is a famous quote from Will Rogers, is that live so that you wouldn't be ashamed to sell the family parrot to the town gossip. Words to live by from Will Rogers. And I'm done. So Stephanie has... No. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm glad I was able to get it done early. Stephanie has certificates that you all should sign to prove that you were here, so you do not have to do it again for 2 more years. Even for other agencies that are asking you to do ethics training, you say, no, I already did this, here you go. So, yeah.
While
make sure
she
you
finished
sign up.
early, you still need to stay for the whole 120 minutes ethically.
No, I guess if any of you have questions,
Just
I'm more
because
than
she spoke
happy.
fast.
I tried to keep along a good clip, and actually, that is the fastest I've ever finished it. So, thank you.
Record.
I know. But
That's
yeah,
because we're efficient in Eastville.
yeah, yes. Add that to the list of E's, right?
Excellent every day.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you. And that is just to receive and file. And anything else from the council?
We gotta get a picture of everybody here, so you have confirmation that you were here. Is that the goal? Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. We go like this, and we go this, there we go, and then one selfie.
There we go. All right. Well, this meeting or the next meeting of the Eastville City Council will be on April 24th at 6:30 p.m. And this meeting is now adjourned.